In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one. Amen. Well, good morning, everybody, and happy St. Chad's Day. Various other saints as well, who we have here. We've got Elizabeth, good morning. Anthony, good morning. And Beverly, I'm glad you've got a glorious day there. I'm in Lincoln at the moment. It started off very cold, and it's still very cold. Good morning, Stella. Also spring flowers and stuff. Morning, Gary and Valerie. Says there, join Father Philippite's group on WhatsApp, except that when I saw this on WhatsApp, I thought, who is Philippites? I've never heard of him. And I looked closely at the little picture there to see this elderly clergyman. I thought, I've never seen him before. And then had a bit closer look and realized that it was me. There we go. Morning, Father Alexander, your prayers. And St. Nicholas Planas, yeah, he was an extraordinary person. If you don't know anything about St. Nicholas Planas, you need to go and look him up now. He lived in a suburb of Athens, and I've been to that church. It's a very ordinary church in so many ways, except for the fact that St. Nicholas was there, living in considerable poverty. They paid him, I think, a leg of lamb once a year for his travels. He was married with a son. And so the parish there was unusually generous. Good morning, George and Maxim. Good morning, Margaret. I'm glad you like Roger Wagner's art. I think it's really quite something. It's really remarkable person. I like looking at that sort of thing, and could never afford to buy any, but there's some of his things that I think are just extraordinary, really. They're not like icons, but they do have a very direct Christian message within them. Morning, Vicky and Malengeth, overcast and cool where you are. Yeah, that's like it is here. In fact, very cool. Good morning, Despina and Graham. Right, it feels like midday to me because I've been up since 4. I said my prayers. I did all sorts of other things, and I've been out shopping. And I've even been to the range where I bought various stuff, including needed some rulers. So I bought one for me here and one for the monastery as well for Brother Daniel. And Brother Daniel, if he's watching this, will be even delighted to know that I bought another pair of scissors. I'm hiding these ones here though. Okay, Stella, yeah, that's not actually such a huge price to them, is it? But never mind. Good morning, Judith. Right, let's crack on. We have got Good morning, Vera. That's not what the trumpet player is about. Good morning, everybody. So we have got a new chapter, chapter 9. And with chapter 9, we've got a whole series of other new things as well. One of you might like to see the painting up here too. This is a mustard underneath here. I just went and bought some mustard and cress for my canary. Good morning, Father Ilya. Your prayers. Right. So, chapter 9, verses 1 to 7. Now, as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said to him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated, sent. So he went and washed and came back seeing. And that's where we're going to end. You're in Serbia, are you, Father Deacon? Very nice. Please light a candle while you're there. And I'd also be very grateful if people would remember to pray for Ioannis and also there's a person called Joel who needs to be prayed for, like mad as well, that Harry has asked us to pray for. Right, we can say when this didn't happen. We can't really say when this did happen. It makes it look on first sight as if the Lord is just leaving the temple, but I think that is slightly unlikely because the discussion between the Lord and his disciples is a little bit too cool, as it were, for somebody who has nearly been stoned to death. So I think it's likely to happen sometime afterwards. Also, we know that in AD 32, the Feast of Tabernacles finished on Wednesday, and this is now the Sabbath. We discover that later on. And therefore, the earliest it can have happened would be Saturday, the 18th of October, in the year AD Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, 1932. No 19 in front of there, of course, just 32. But it could be any time between then and the Feast of the Dedication, which took place at the end of October, beginning of November that year. So we've got a sort of 10-day period, 15-day period, when we could be thinking about this particular thing taking place. The more likely truth, though, is that it's nowhere, not even remotely connected with either of these two feasts. And what the evangelist has done is put it in here, because earlier on in chapter 8, the Lord talks about being the light of the world in one of the I am sayings. And the Lord is now going to bring light into the eyes of somebody. And so he's making an example of this there. Okay, so that's probably what is going on within this. You've seen other people turning up. So good morning, Jovan and Irini. Good morning, Holly. That's good. So we're not really sure, but almost certainly the evangelist is making a theological point rather than keeping to any sort of time scale. He's saying to himself, oh yeah, while we're thinking about it, light and all that sort of stuff, remember that time that the Lord came out of the temple, and what did he see? He saw this blind man, blind from birth. So that's an interesting thing to begin with. So he passes by. He's wandering past. Now, it's almost certainly, I can remember when I lived in Somalia, back then, the only church was the Roman Catholic Cathedral in the center of Mogadishu. And I used to walk down from where I lived, down the hill, straight line down the hill, past the Parliament building and onto the Roman Catholic Cathedral, where incidentally, the Muslims who were the, what did they do? They were rebels, the Muslim rebels. They murdered the Archbishop and all the monks and nuns who were there, and then did terrible things to the orphans that were living inside there as well. It was a good cathedral, very good one for parts of Africa and for there. And they had a large number of nuns from Mother Teresa's group looking after orphans there. And they were very, very kind to me personally. I was about 21 at the time. What's all this about? On the steps of this cathedral, on Sunday mornings, and also Saturday evenings, there would be a huge crowd of beggars who were disabled. Some had no legs, some had legs but couldn't walk because they had had polio. Some were had special needs. I can remember one who used to scoot around on a sort of tray fitted with wheels, and others would drag themselves there. There would be a few people with leprosy, and other people who were blind, mainly with things like trachoma, which in fact the Catholics are hoping to treat. And the Catholics who are going there, mainly Italians, would go up and they'd give people money on the way into the church and on the way out, and the Catholic monks would then feed the people who are outside. So something almost like that will be happening. So the Lord comes out of the temple and he's confronted by a whole series of people who are beggars. We know also that St. Peter also does something very similar. He's going into the temple in Acts of the Apostles. He sees a man who is lame, he cannot walk, and this guy is then healed by St. Peter. Anyway, the Lord is passing by. There have been lots of people there, and the Lord then fixes his eyes on, and the Greek has that sort of feeling within it, where actually, Father Alexander, we tend to, in Lincoln, but then they usually come well before the service, and we give them breakfast, coffee and breakfast. And we also hand out warm clothing and let them use the loo. And what else do we do? It's about beggars outside churches on Sundays. So, but a lot of them know me personally anyway, because quite a lot of the people who are homeless and all sorts of other rascals in Lincoln know me quite well. Just goes to show what a terrible person I am. Company, dear. Anyway, the Lord fixes his eyes on this particular person. Out of all the crowd of people there, he notices this one. And this one is interesting because whilst the others probably had things like trachoma, which makes you gradually blind, or like me, and I'm getting a cataract, and gradually going blind, this one had been blind from birth. So he was sort of malformed, as people would say. Okay? Can't remember what people usually say about that. Deformed, born without everything there, deformed, malformed, blind from birth. And the last saying the Lord has said is, I am the light of the world. So this is why these two things fit together. Now, the authorities in the previous chapter have proven themselves to be utterly blind. They cannot see that this is God. They don't know. And later on in this chapter, the man formerly blind then tells everybody, well, he must be the prophet, and he bears witness, quite strong witness actually, to the authorities. And by doing so, what he's doing is he's providing a scheme for how we might also bear witness to the Lord as well. Good morning, Philip. I'm going to phone you in a few minutes, Philip. Okay, so have that scheme there about how we need to bear witness to the Lord as well. And bit by bit, we'll see what happens here. The man goes he's called by the Lord. He goes through a catechumenate. He has a baptism. He's set on his way by the Lord. He comes to know the Lord better. He's no longer a neophyte. He begins to understand the Lord better. He witnesses and he even suffers for the Lord. Okay, so we have to think about this in terms of ourselves. This is our own Christian way forward. So the authorities have proved to be blind. This man is blind from birth. So what everybody is saying is, well, what's he done to make him blind? Was it him or was it his parents? Because they had this feeling at the time. There must be some good reason why somebody is suffering. A bit like if you ask Hindus or Sikhs, or I'm not so sure about Sikhs, Hindus and Buddhists, there's that idea of karma. It's got to be somebody's fault, either yours in previous life or for some reason you have been born in this way. Okay, so who sinned? And do you see what the disciples are doing? They're trying to apportion blame. They're judging, in other words. They're sitting in judgment over this man, and they're wanting to find out whose fault it is. So in their mind is the law, condemnation, and so on. And they're wanting to know, okay, whose fault is this? But in Jesus's mind, there's something quite different. In his mind, there is salvation, completeness, healing, forgiveness, wholeness. And although the world is fallen and it's a hard place, the Buddhists also say you mustn't blame a stone for being hard. And the world is hard, a place of suffering and difficulty. Okay, beautiful, but there are cracks that crack their way. What's the word I'm looking for? Crack their way all the way through the whole of life. And some of those cracks go straight through a person. Okay, right the way through someone. And probably nowadays we all know people who feel that there's something deeply wrong within them psychologically. Some of them say they've been born in the wrong body, or they just don't feel at peace with the world at all, or they have terrible illnesses, sometimes genetic illnesses or cancers or things like that, that eat them up. That is not God's will. That is a sign of the fall. But those people are not necessarily personally, well, they are not personally responsible for this crack that happens to go straight through their body. That's a shocking thing, and I think we have to take sickness and sorrow, sickness and suffering, and that sort of thing very seriously. And within Christianity, what we do is we don't just sit there and accept it and say, oh, well, this person, they must have done something bad in the past, so it serves them right, either they or their parents or in a former life or whatever it might be. We sit around and say, what can be done? What can we do about it? And that is the entirety of the Western medical history. It's one of looking at the problem and saying, well, what can be done? In sense in saying, without these terrible things that happen to people, all of the hard work and the courage and the scientific endeavor and so on that so many people undergo, the courage and the thoughtfulness and the all those other things just wouldn't be there at all. And the Lord says, this has got nothing to do with blame. I'm not going to blame. It's got nothing to do with that. In this man here, as it happens, the manifest glory of God, the works of God, are going to be made manifest within him. Now I can see, and I forget that this is a manifest, it's a work of God. It's a manifest of the glory of God. I can hear. That has to do with the glory of God. I have taste buds. I can taste things. That is a work of God. I can walk, thank God, and that is a work of God being made manifest within me. I can think to a certain extent. That is God manifest within me, a work of God in me. I have my own being. That is a work of God manifest in me. Some people might think it's not such a good one, but anyway, it is there. We are there, and so many of these things we take for granted. Seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, touching, being able to think and act and behave, and all these other things are examples of the work of God within us. And when we see some of these things not present in somebody, then in our tradition, in the way that we think about it, is that we work hard to see what we can do to overcome this problem. And that's what it is that the Lord does. And it's quite dramatic, amazing, in fact. Okay, what does he do? This is what the Lord does. He says, I must do the works, I must work the works of him who sent me. Okay, so number one, he says, what am I here for? Why have I been sent? And this word sent comes 3 times, really, within this little paragraph here. God, the Father, sent the Lord. In a little while, the Lord will send the man who is blind off to this pool. And the pool is called Siloam, which means sent. So all of these ideas being sent are being rubbed into us by John, who's trying to say, let me slap this into your head. I want you to understand this, okay? Push it into your head. So you know about it. All right, really important. So Jesus said, soon he'll go send the blind man. And then he talks about day and night. Okay, we are daytime creatures. And at night time, unless we have lights like we do nowadays, but back then they didn't. And most people, when it went dark, they sat around the fire, or they burnt a reed or something until it was bedtime, then they went to bed, or they chatted by the firelight, and then they went to bed. You couldn't do any work, it wasn't light enough. Then, okay, there may well be, and some people say, and some of the fathers say there's possibly a hint, there's now late afternoons, beginning to get dark, and the Lord is making this clear, maybe this is why the man goes off to the temple, because he goes to the evening service. Who knows? We don't know. Pure speculation. But the Father's quite like that. But he then says, the Lord says, okay, these are the works of the day, but night is coming. There's going to be a time of utter darkness. That utter darkness is when the Lord is dead. Remember, the sunlight stops. Even the world shakes. The Lord is put in the tomb. And some of the people never, ever recover their sight. They never have the sight to begin with, and they never receive it. But other people at the resurrection will receive their sight and completely see who this person is. And that light will never be extinguished. The fathers say, okay, the Lord died, but actually when he says, well, I'm with you, well, he's always with us. He's with us at the end of the age. And therefore the Lord is there. Okay? So God is there. Jesus is going to be removed from them, but not something awfully to worry about. He then says, as long as I am in the world, he's always in the world. I am the light of the world. But you can switch off that light like that. You close your eyes and behold, you cannot see. You close your spiritual eyes and behold, you cannot see God. And there's nothing that God can do to somebody who refuses to open their internal eyes to look at God. Nothing whatever. And then what? Well, we must also be in the light. The disciples at this point are not in the light. They're not there. What do they want to do? They're wanting to accuse this man. They want to find out and blame somebody for him being blind. Still, at this point, they're wanting to do that. But we mustn't be like that. We must follow the Lord's way. We must be also people of light. And I've said before that so many people think of Christians and Christianity as part of the problem, not the solution. Always irritates me when I see solution written on the back of a van. Something like heating solutions, office solutions, roofing solutions, or your gardening solutions. Just call yourself a plumber, then I know what you're doing. Say you're an electrician, then I know what you're doing. Just say that you sell me office furniture, then I know what you're up to. My computer solutions, just tell me you work in computing. Tisk. Anyway, Christians are often seen as the problem. We're part of the darkness. We're not part of that dawning light. So people think of us as being miserable and judgmental and condemning, particularly people who don't suffer from the sins that I have. I can easily condemn them and say, "Pah, that person. Thank goodness I don't have that sin." Just like the tax collector and the Pharisee, they can go to hell as far as I'm concerned. We must never be like that. Negative, legalistic, and quite a number of people wear a mask as well. You've probably been to churches where everybody is grinning from ear to ear, and all you really want to do is give them a damn good thumping. Maybe that says more about me. I find it incredibly, a friend of mine used to call it Cheshire catting, a great big grin from ear to ear, and irrepressible joyfulness. People think of us as being bigots, but actually light casts no shadow. You can try this. Light a candle, put it near a wall, take a torch, shine the torch at the candle, and you'll see that the flame does not have any shadow. You see the wick and the shadow of the wick, but the light itself does not cast a shadow. We have to think about it in that sort of way. Now, what does the Lord do? He does something really interesting. He spits, he takes something from within himself. Previously, in Genesis, he has blown onto them, he breathes out. He's not ready to breathe out this time because he breathes out on the cross when he brings new life to the world. But the first time he made clay and he made people out of the clay of the earth. Dust you are, and to dust you return. But dust you were, and now you're flesh. And he doesn't this time breathe, which he could have done. He spits, and he spits on the ground. And the fathers are in slight, not so much disagreement, but they speculate here. Some say one thing, some say another. Some say, some people say this, and some people say that about this. Some say that what he's doing is that he is making new eyes for this person, making eyes for him. He spits on the ground, he makes clay, and he pops a pair of new eyes out of clay into this man's head. And then he has to go and wash off the excess. Others say, no, that's not what he does. He spits on the ground, and he then anoints, and then the man goes and washes. And they also say, you notice, he's washed many times, and many people wash in the pool of Siloam. That's where they got the water from for doing the water libation in the temple only a few days before, perhaps, but certainly at the Feast of Tabernacles. Nobody else got healed that way. Lots of other people have got muddy faces, and none of them got new eyes. Okay, but the big difference here is that the ingredients came from within God and his own spittle. In those days also, they did use spit as they thought of it as having healing properties. So they spat. He spat. He also spat when he healed somebody's tongue, if you remember. So he anoints the eyes, or he makes new eyeballs, and he pops them into the person's head. Most of the fathers are in agreement that this is a deliberate act of creation. The Lord is recreating whatever is missing in the man's eyes. He is finishing him off. He is doing the last thing necessary to make this person whole. We don't know how old he is. He's at least 13 because he's of age and he's regarded as a man. But probably this means that he's at least in his 20s, maybe much older. His mum and dad are still alive, and people didn't live all that long then, so he'd be a maximum about 40. So somewhere between 13 and 40 years old. He's been sitting in the dark so far. And then what does the Lord say to him? He says, go wash in the pool of Siloam. Okay, so he sends him to the pool of scent. Go off there. Okay. Yes, Maxime, it does say anointed, but it's and it says anointed in Greek, but it's what the fathers say about what he means by the word anointed there. Okay, exactly what's he talking about there? And some of them say he just simply rubs clay on his eyes. Others say that actually what he's doing is that he's recreating eyes for this man, or rather creating for him for the first time. So the man is sent to the pool of scent, and the Lord himself is also sent. So you need to look back at verse 4 to get that idea. And you have some interesting things here. The fathers say, it's interesting really, he's anointed. It's like being anointed with the oil of catechumens. And he doesn't really understand anything. So he's like a catechumen, but he's an obedient catechumen. he's told to go to this pool and wash, and he does do. He doesn't say to the Lord, "What are you doing putting mud in my eyes, you rotter?" He doesn't ask too many questions about this person either, does he? It's interesting. He has no idea who it is who's done this to him, but he's obedient. And he goes off and he, as it were, washes. He's baptized in the Siloam pool, probably used later on by the apostles for baptizing people after Pentecost. And then he returns. And this is a really exciting thing. So he went and washed and came back seeing. And that's what happens after baptism. What do we call people being newly baptized? We call them newly enlightened. And this is what this man is as well. He is newly enlightened neophyte. He doesn't fully understand what has gone on yet. He needs to meet the Lord later on in order to have a much better understanding of what is going on. And you see, this is the way that we see things leading one to another, to another, to another. The same happens to our own lives. All of us are beginners. None of us really know. But we are moved from this darkness and stages towards light. And finally, he gets to see the light of the world himself later on and in the temple. So, a wonderful thing that St. John Chrysostom says about this. He says, "Thus our Lord manifested his glory, and no small glory it was, to be proved the creator of the world, as he proved to be by this miracle. For on the principle that the greater contains the less, this act of creation included in it every other act of creation." Okay? And I think we can see that very easily within this particular pericope. Okay? Right. Let us go and see what people are saying. 10:32. So I might well gloss over things because helping beggars. Here in Lincoln, it's illegal to give any beggars money or food or anything like that. And you can be arrested for doing that. It's not because they don't want to help beggars. It's exactly the opposite. What they're trying to do is starve them into seeking help. Not so easy to do that. One of the members of my parish, she's now retired from this work, but she had a restaurant. And at the end of each day, she'd go out and invite in, she'll be furious if she knows I'm telling the story, invite in the people she called her Lazaruses. And her Lazaruses would come and they'd eat really, really beautiful, fresh food. And she would give them as much as they desired. And if they didn't like anything that was left over, she would then cook them something different. And she would say this was one of they were her guests. And she loved them and they loved her. And many of them actually ended up, because somebody had taken trust in them, they ended up properly accommodated. And there are plenty around here. I live in a very poor part of Lincoln, and not actually where I live here is not bad. But if you go up onto the high street, this is fine. But if you go up onto the high street, it's just 100 yards up, then even at the corner of the road, right the way up, past the railway station, there are lots of people who are homeless up there. It's a very difficult thing. And somehow or other we need to help them. Matthew, indeed I will. It's something we're only just getting to understand, isn't it? And I think most of us are a long way from understanding. It's something that, maybe I should put that differently, I am working hard to try and understand this better. There's a lot of information on the internet, and a lot of it is work in progress, you might say. Vera, yes, God does help and heal. Not always in the most obvious way. Many times what has to happen is that we need the inspiration to work hard at doing it. It's like that thing, why are there people starving in the world when there's so much food? The people in Yemen, where I lived for quite a long time, that is one of the biggest famines we have seen for a very, very long time. People starving to death in poor old Yemen. Never was a place where there's a huge amount of food. But they were coping and doing well. And where they weren't growing this drug called GAT, they were growing plenty of delicious vegetables. And now, obviously, because of so many years of war there and embargoes and all sorts of other things that happened, people are starving. And generally speaking, our governments aren't really willing to do much about it. Christos, is there a book that you can recommend on spiritual understanding of illness? This issue that troubles many people, there are no easy answers. There is actually one, and I know whereabouts it is in the monastery. I could put out my hand and touch it. It may well be that Brother Daniel can put out his hand and touch it himself, or Brother Paul can tell us about it as well. And if that is the case, that would be very good. And let you know. But yes, we do have one there. I have not read it, but it's the problem of Theodicy. I know in the past I've looked up Orthodox Theodicy on the internet, and there's quite a lot of information there. And it's well worthwhile looking at that. Christine, good morning. Yes, well, good evening to you. Knees often buckle at the weight of the world, leaving me with outstretched hands, very much a beggar. But do not know if this is the believer's posture. Well, St. Paul says, what I pass on to you is what I received. And it's like when St. Peter fixed his eyes on that beggar in the man whose legs don't work outside the temple in Acts of the Apostles. It says he fixed his eyes and said, gold and silver I have none, but what I have I'll give to you. Well, what he had, he received from God. And what he then had, he then passed on to him. Okay? What you don't have, you cannot pass on. But what you do have is only yours for handing out to others. We don't have any spiritual gift that is there just for you. And there is no such thing as salvation that is only for you, or you receiving salvation, which you then keep. It's like manna in the desert. If you take salvation, in inverted commas, and you put it into a pot and you hide it at the back of your tent, when you next look at it, you'll find that it is entirely full of maggots. The salvation you have is for you to eat and then for you to distribute. And it will go rotten if you do anything else. Okay? It has to be given. It has to be passed on. It has to be passed out to other people. And every spiritual gift that we receive, whatever it might be, whether it's teaching or preaching or healing or whatever it might be, just even the most basic understanding of God, or we've been given gifts in creativity of one sort or another, or the gift of being able to love others. You know how it is? Sometimes you discover people who are just so full of love, and that love pours out of them all the time. Or whether it's just a gift of generosity or hospitality, or whether you are an organizer. We need good people who are good organizers and thoughtful people to become politicians. We've got such a load of rats amongst our politicians. We've got some very good ones as well, I might say. There's such a group of self-seeking rats. These people need to be replaced by good people whose job is not to say yes and then vote in the particular lobby that everybody else says, but to say, up with this I will not put. Or local politicians, people who walk down the streets and say, how is it that just around the corner from me here, there is an area that must be one of the poorest areas in Western Europe, or parts of Lincolnshire here are definitely some of the poorest areas in Western. How can that be? This is an incredibly wealthy country. Anyway, enough of that. But, whatever it is that God has given you, is there not just, you can put your wonderful entrepreneurial skills to use and feather your own nest. On the other hand, you can put your wonderful entrepreneurial skills to use and change the society. It's the difference between what which rabbi was it? Baal Shem Tov, I think, said he looked out of his window and he saw a rabbi walking past with a large bundle of sticks on his back to go and warm everybody within the synagogue. A few minutes later, he saw another rabbi walking past in a thick fur coat. And he said about this one, aha, this one is a fur coat rabbi. And our danger is that we can become fur coat Christians. Actually, and whatever the opposite of a tautology is, that's what that is. It's a contradiction. You cannot be a fur coat Christian and only keep yourself warm. Okay? Every skill maxim is a gift from God. Every one of them. All it needs is proper direction. So if you think about some of the things that happen now, people whose skill is organization, who then use this skill horrifically in order to oppress whole societies. Think about something like ISIS. You have people there who are unbelievably well organized, people who had really good skills in every type and kind of organization, actually, and creativity and thinking in an entrepreneurial way, who then put these things to most appalling use. Other people with amazing leadership skill, who then put this to appalling use. Not just them, but all over the place, people do this. And these same skills, same abilities, whatever it might be woodwork or the ability to fix things. These are hugely important skills that can be put to the use of the whole of society. Okay, so that is enough for one day. 10:43. What will Margaret say? For 2 minutes, I'll have broken my own record. Father Philip, Lincoln Mayor. God forbid. I know several people who've been Lincoln Mayor. They do a good job. It is better they do it, and I support them. Well, I do what I do. Edward, your prayers, God bless you. It's nice to see you there. My love also to your family. I'm so much looking forward to seeing them again. Okay, everybody, right. Reminder, please, to pray for Yanis. Reminder, please, to pray for Joel and his family. Reminder, please, to pray for Elizabeth. Okay, those are the three people uppermost. And also there's another person in my heart that I don't know why, but all of last night he was in my mind. Now died, young Australian called Anton. Why he's in my mind all night, I don't know, but he was. And if you could pray for him as well. Okay, and also for his family. Young man. Okay, God bless you. Your prayers.